Good evening, everyone. You're all very welcome this evening. I'm James from the Cork Sports Partnership. I'm a Sports Development Officer. So we're delighted to have 2into3 with Patricia and Dennis with us this evening. So we're looking forward to a very informative session. I want to thank all the clubs, I suppose, first of all, for submitting questions. I've sent on to Patricia and Dennis, so they'll address some of those this evening. I suppose a couple of ground rules: make sure everyone has their speaker on mute, and we'll look after questions in the chat box and I suppose address them when we can. If there's anything we do not cover this evening, I'll follow up with an email tomorrow morning. With the session will be recorded, and I will follow up in the morning with the recording and any additional resources that I've received that we'll send on to you. But I suppose you all have my email as well, so if anyone has any questions following this, feel free to pop me an email and I can see what I can do. I suppose my own role would be training education, working with clubs, schools, and I suppose Cork Sports Partnership at the moment working with 32 national governing bodies of sport with different programs across older adults, women, schools, training education, clubs development and stuff like that. So if anyone has any questions on anything like that, or feel free to look at the website, corksports.ie, or Facebook, Twitter and Instagram as well, fairly active, so keep an eye on all those. So I'll keep you know further anyway, so I'll just pass you up to Patricia and Dennis. But yeah, if anyone has any questions in the meantime, I'll be checking the chat box and I'll try to address them as best as possible. But thanks a million, guys.
Good evening, everybody. I will be taking charge of the presentations and all this evening, but I'm joined by our director, Dennis O'Connor, who will help me along with the Q&A and will assist in any questions that come up. I'll just pass you over to Dennis to say hello.
Yeah, well, hello everybody. I am a native of Cork, born and reared in the Mardyke. Presentation Brothers College, UCC, College Corinthians. So it's nice to be back in Cork virtually tonight.
Well, as you can guess from my accent, I'm not from Cork. So I will try and tone down the accent as much as I can. If anybody has any issues, please, I will not be offended at all if anybody needs me to go over anything again. But just in case. So my name is Patricia Keenan and I come from work with a company called 2into3, and Dennis is a director. Tonight, what we're going to go through is just letting you know who we are and what the company does. We're also going to look at the sports capital landscape. So what type of funding has been put out before, what kind of projects they have funded, who has funded, the areas, things like that. We will then run through the actual scoping of your application. So it's looking at what you need and how to identify the items that you're going to apply for. We'll look then through the application process, and that's right down to completing your application, what paperwork you will need, what appendices need to be signed, what quotes you need, what information you need to include. We'll also look at the common pitfalls and the checklists that you need to have for filling in your application. We'll also do a Q&A at the end. However, as we go through this, there's we break it down into about 4 different sections, and I know we have received some questions. So I will answer these ones that I've received as we go along. But as well as that, if you have something on a specific item that we're talking about, just put it in the chat box and James can keep an eye on it. So 2into3, we work for some reason my screen's gone funny here. We work with a number of different organizations. We work within the third sector, non-profit making organizations. It just gives you a feel for the type of sports clubs we're working with at the moment, and we are running these series of webinars about the Sports Capital Programme as a whole for 2020. However, the company has had extensive experience over the last 10 years in filling out application forms for the Sports Capital Programme. So, Sports Capital and Equipment Programme, what it is. This is the main vehicle for the government to support sports clubs and physical recreation within the country. It is open to all sports clubs. It's open to voluntary and community groups. It's open to NGBs, national governing bodies. It's open to local authorities. It is open to third level colleges, education and training boards and schools. And sometimes this can be worked out as a partnership arrangement where two or three of the above would come together. It is for non-profit making organisations, so it wouldn't be for any private gyms or private sports clubs. The first thing that everybody needs to do, and if there's anybody sitting here tonight and hasn't done it yet, you need to register with Oscar. Oscar is the online sports portal where you can apply. So as part of the application process, you put in your organisation type, cycling club, football club, whatever, the name, and make sure that name matches what's on your bank account, the air code, your address. And this is where people get a bit worried, your tax registration number. And I know we've already saved a question about the tax registration number. The simplest way to explain it is it's like a PPS number that we all have. This just shows that you are registered as a non-profit making club. You will go onto revenue.ie and you would register as a non-profit making sports club, voluntary organisation also. It does not mean that you have tax returns or tax liabilities or anything like that. It is just making your presence known for the government. And they use this as their primary source of information about who you are and if you're eligible to apply. Again, it will cut out any private sports clubs, private gyms, things like that applying. So it's not something to be worried about. And I know it causes a lot of concern for sports clubs, but it really isn't. It's like everybody has a PPS number. It's getting a TRN for your club. Once you're on to Oscar, this is the dashboard that you will be using, and this will be the main source of information for you and your main portal for putting in your application. So you will see if your club has received any funding beforehand, and you can check that out. Why that is really, really important is you cannot apply for funding for the same item within 10 years. So you could not apply for the exact same piece of equipment in your club. Now, if you're applying for additional equipment due to additional participation, new members, new clubs, things like that, getting involved with, that's fine. But you need to be aware of what you've applied for before. You also need that for your score later on, because you will get a score whether or not you've received funding before. So it's an important one to know. Now, if we were to look at what funding went out in 2018, in total of the country, 18 million went to GAA and 9.5 million also went to multi-sports. This is for capital and equipment. So in total, 52 million went out. In Munster, 15, nearly 16 million was put out. Again, you can see who were the big winners: GAA, multi-sports, soccer, golf. It more or less follows the exact same path as the national allocations. So if you are in one of those sports, just be aware of that. Know that you have been successful before. People have been giving out money, and it's not just for the big organised clubs. It is the government wants to see small emerging clubs receive equipment grants or even capital grants. Again, we can see how the money was divided up in capital, and this is where the capital grants was handed out. I'm sorry, there's a waiting room up there, James. Could you try and see if we can get that? Thanks. So the capital allocations that was handed out again went to Gaelic Games and right down to all other sports, canoeing, camogie, all of those. Everybody was successful. If we look at equipment grants, this is where the picture totally changes and the landscape of who is applying and who is successful changes. Now, there was 8.5 million given out for equipment, and you can see that is by far spread across the minor sports as they would see it in the capital allocations. So you've got your golf, rowing, kayaking, sailing, diving and snorkeling. There was an awful lot of water sports. And you know, the rugby and the basketball and the GA was not as big for getting equipment grants. The government are very, very keen to see equipment grants being funded. What about money that is asked for and what is received? Not clubs will not always get what they ask for. And you will see there that it's very far from even half. Most clubs and most sports bodies will only receive a third of what is asked for. So 145 million was applications was received, 52 million was given out. So it's only a third, but you can see different clubs have different success rates. Canoeing and kayaking, 73%. So that's not saying 73% of applications was successful. It's 73% of the total amount that was asked for was received. So don't always think, oh, it's one club, you're competing against each other. They will try to support as many sports as possible. Should that mean you'll also get less? But that would need to be budgeted for when you're applying for your funding as well. Always maybe be ambitious is all I would say. We go down to the equipment grants. You can see there a large proportion of the funding goes for equipment grants. You know, nearly 1,200 was funded, whereas only a small proportion was funded with the 150k. We're going back down to your per capita allocation. This is basically the fact that Dublin has got a higher population base than the rest of the country. So they try to give out the money by per capita. And Dublin, as with the highest population, they try to give more money in Dublin. Speaking as to a Cork audience, my apologies, but that's just the reality of how they allocate that. But if you want to see, you know, when we break it down by the counties, Cork is doing okay. It's not one of the higher counties for getting funding. You could see that that's Kerry, Sligo. They're way high. They're getting 16 euros a head per capita, whereas in Cork as a county there's only 10 euros per head. So this is something to be very aware of. It's far from Dublin. You can see it's way down there, and this is where they're really keen for getting applications in. Is there any questions before I go any further?
No, nothing yet.
No, okay. So what can you apply for? What is available? So if you're a club which has title to your property that you are using, you can apply for up to 150,000 for a capital project, okay? If you have no title or it's less than 15 years lease, then you can only apply up to 50,000 for that property. Maintenance equipment, it is capped at 30,000. If it's equipment for sports equipment, gym equipment, things like that, then it's 50,000, okay? Except if you're a national governing body. The full grant available is 300,000 for a national governing body. So you need to be very aware of whether or not, if it's a capital project, you have lease for over or title over 15 years or under 15 years, and that needs to be signed off by one of your appendices, which I'll go into in greater detail later on. What does it fund? It'll fund in a capital project your fencing, your lighting, your LED lights, multi-use pitches, non-personal sports equipment, so gym equipment, your bibs and your balls, as people used to always say to us, practice equipment for boxing, martial arts, boating. So it could be for a kayak or for any sort of canoe boats or anything like that. It's non-personal, so it will be owned by your club. It's not owned by members. And this is because we want to encourage, the fund wants to encourage participation in sport. So if you're thinking that the cost is going to prohibit anybody to get involved in your sport, this is what this fund is for. So in terms of getting more young players, lady players, gentlemen players, whatever your sport should be, you're trying to encourage them and overcome the obstacles that people may face to join your sport. If you're ever in doubt of what will this fund, think to yourself, will it encourage sport? Will it encourage the participation in sport? If it's yes, then you can go a bit further. If it's no, then that's really where it's going to stop. So you need to always ask your question, will this increase the participation in my sport or performance in my sport? Okay, what it will not fund. It will not fund any sort of viewing or spectators stands, should they be portable, fixed, or anything like that. So it's not for spectators. It will not fund any play equipment, regardless of it's to keep people entertained during training or anything like that. There, it's not eligible. It will not fund the likes of car parks or roads or driveways or anything like that. This is about participation in sport. Okay. So I've seen a question here. It was about LED lighting for pitches and walkways. Yes, the LEDs lighting is eligible. However, you will possibly need planning permission for if it's new lighting you're going to be putting up. So if you need new planning, that's going to be difficult at this time scale. And you will need an appendices, but I'll go all through all these appendices later. But if it's replacement lighting, it's a lot easier. But LED lighting, yes, is eligible under the programme. Okay, so planning and time frame for your application. Is there any questions there on what is and what is not available?
I have 2 questions there.
Yeah.
Would a rough and not fairway moor be classed as maintenance rather than capital equipment, i.e. subject to max 30k?
It's maintenance equipment and it's capped at 30k.
And
there was a raft of applications in the 2018 programme for mowers, and that is why it has been capped this time round.
And in relation to wallet funds, is pitch drainage okay?
Yes.
Okay. That's it for now.
Just be careful in terms of anything that you may find there could be like planning issues for. So fencing, lighting, things like that there may require your planning. Okay, so planning and the time frame of putting together an application. This is key, your 6 grading criteria. The first one comes back to what I've been saying before, the likelihood of increasing participation and improving performance. You have to show how this investment is going to increase participation and improving performance in your sport. It can be getting new players, it can be assisting those that are already there, it can be overcoming difficulties. Should it be special needs or disabled access or anything like that? It can also be for helping those with hidden disabilities, mental health issues, things like that. But you need to show what it's all for and improving performance. The sharing of facilities, and I know we've had a question in already about sharing of facilities. You need to sign a license agreement if you're going to share your facilities. It is not enough to say we let the school use our pitch or we let another club use some of our canoes, or there is a youth club that we let come in to use it. You have to have this in a legally binding license agreement. You cannot just say, because you have to prove what you're doing. So sharing of facilities, there is scores there for that. The level of socioeconomic disadvantage in your area. Unfortunately, this can't be really negotiated. The club that you're applying for has an address. You put in the address of that club or where the project is based, and on the Pubble, and I will do a live sort of experiment at the end of this here with I'll put the website up and you can see where it's your different indexes would be. You will get a score for your postcode, and for that score you will get how much funding you need to give in and what points you can get. So it's a given table, and I'll go through it just in a second here. Technical merits of the project is whether or not you've got your planning permission. So if you haven't applied for planning, you'll get no score. If you've applied for it but you haven't got it, you might get a couple of points. If you've got your full planning, you get full points. So that's why I'm saying if you don't have planning this stage, I really wouldn't recommend. You can apply for it, there's nothing to stop you, but I wouldn't recommend it. And you have to get your quotations. You have to get one quotation for every piece of work that you're doing and every piece of equipment. That can be screen grabs if it's equipment, and they need to be all, costed out. And it's not the company that you have to buy off when it comes down to it, but that has to be costed. Level of own funding available, that will come down to what your bank can show. Your bank statement needs to show a level of funding, and what percentage of own funding will probably be guided by what your score is, and I'll show this in a second, and the level of sports capital funding you've received in the last 10 years. So if you've received no money, you will get a high score. If you have received funding, then you will get a lower score. So this is what I'm saying about your Pubble index. So what the website's there, maps.pubble.ie, and you would say, right, well, the area I live in is minus 2.77. Therefore, to get the maximum points, I'm sorry, it's cut off the bottom line on this here slide. There is up to 13 points available. You need to put in over 32%. So if you want to get 13 points in your match funding, you need to put in 32% of the funds for the full project cost. However, if you live in an area which has got a score of minus 24, therefore you only need to put in a maximum of 15%, over 15% to get the maximum score. So two things I would say this evening or tomorrow morning you need to do: get your Oscar registration sorted and find out what your score is. And once you find out your score, that will make the whole financial planning and the financial projections for this here make sense. Okay, so what are the documentations that you'd require? You will require quotation no matter what type of work you're doing. So if it's capital or equipment or whatever, a quotation needs to be sought. I'll say again, you only need one quote, and it is not the company that you need to actually purchase from or secure work from if you are successful in your grant application. You need proof of funding. So that can be your match funding to the level for the points that you need, or it can be in the form of a loan. I know James has some information from Clan Credo, who will give out funding loans to voluntary organisations and sports organisations, and I know that's going out to you after your pack. If the loan needs to be filled out, an appendices showing that you have that loan in place needs to be completed by that person, by that organisation. It can be a bank, it can be a credit union, whatever, but it needs to be just signed off that you have your loan in place. And this is where we get down to all these other appendices that needs to be filled out. So you have Appendix 5, that shows that you have title to that property, and that needs to be signed off by your club solicitor. If you don't have title, it needs to be Appendix 4, which is your landlord or whoever owns the property. If you're NGB, you need to have confirmation of your status, and it comes back down to 4 or 5. So if you're a governing body, then you can apply. If you are seeking planning for the work and you don't have the planning, you need to have Appendix 2 signed out to say that you don't need planning. But if you do need planning, you need to show your planning that you have in place. So Appendix 2, if it's not needed, and that needs to be signed off by either an architect or somebody. I'll show examples of these in a moment. When you come into the school and Education and Training Board, you need to have license agreements. And I'm going to hand you over to Dennis now, because there was a couple of questions in particular about these, which he has more experience of.
Yeah, well, the reason these exist, the state is giving money to an asset, but it wants the asset to be used for club use. So the only reason it would give money to a school is if it's using it with a club. It won't give money to a school on its own. And that's why there needs to be a license agreement for 15 years or more valid from the date of you applying. Now, there is a 5, and if a school, and some schools, very few of them, but some schools are on land owned by the Department of Education. If that's the case, then you're completing Appendix 5A as opposed to 5 by the department. If you are trying to do a joint application with a school, or if there's a school here on the call and the department owns the land and you haven't already asked for them to complete Appendix 5A, you're going to struggle in the time frame. So when it comes down to a license, and they are legal agreements that are binding on the two parties for a period of 15 years or more. And so if you need a license, i.e. you're a joint application, or you want to have a license to get a scoring and sharing, and you haven't already commenced discussions to agree a license, it'll be very difficult to get developed, approved, signed, and executed between now and the 1st of March. Nonetheless, over time, these are very important things. Now, there was one question came up in relation to a sports club within a university. Now, there's an anomaly with the sports clubs, university or institute of technologies or technological universities, sports clubs are not eligible to apply for sports capital grant because the department feels that, well, that's up to the Department of Education and those institutions to fund their sports. However, you can have a license agreement between a third level institute and a club that's not a university sports club, and they can jointly apply. I don't make up these rules. That's the way it is at the moment. Now, that issue of the sort of anomaly about third level sports clubs not having access, particularly saying things like rowing clubs and so on, is something that needs to be addressed as a policy change. But under the current grant rules, you can't apply.
Let him say the bad news. Okay, so if we come back to, we need the quotations. I mean, a very clear quotation from every company that is submitting for either capital works or for equipment. I just noticed, I went through the chat box there just when we were doing that. Your planning doesn't need to be granted, but I think I explained it does help. So it's something that if you haven't got it in place, I would be question whether or not you want to use this funding round this time round. Other documents, this is the loan document, needs to be signed off by your financial institution or client credo, whoever you have, if you don't have enough money in your bank account to show match funding. Okay, just mention on the bank statements, it's a moment in time. It's not saying that that money has to be ring fenced and kept in your account and can't be touched until you find out about this grant. It's not. It's showing that you have financial capacity to match the funding that they're going to give you. So if you know that you've got a big expenditure coming out, but you might have money coming back in later on, that's fine. It's just a snapshot in time that you need to show that you have got funding and the financial capacity to actually match and pay for your side, your share of the grant. Okay, so if planning's not required, you need this filled out, and they're saying the planning authority or a technical officer, technical supervisor, that could be an engineer or it could be an architect, but they will sign off it and give their qualifications of who they are. The license agreement, so if you're working with an art club, so that's not just if you're with a school, but if it's with another club and you're going to share the equipment that you're going to buy, or you're going to share the site that you're going to be on or anything like that. I think one of the questions that come up in the chat box, what if you don't own a clubhouse or anything or equipment? You just need to show the business address for your club, so where your equipment will be stored, or who is the treasurer, who is the chair, who does the letters go to, basically, is the address you need for that. But don't worry if you don't have a clubhouse. It's not just for any sports club that have a clubhouse already. It's for any type of sport, especially new ones. And it's for small grants as well. Don't be put off thinking, well, I have to apply for 10,000 or 5,000 or 20,000 or whatever like that. It's for small grants too. It's for new clubs. So this is where the landlord will confirm to allow you access to the site if you are to do any capital works. And then this is also for your title requirements. So the application itself, you will have 800 characters, which doesn't sound very much, and it isn't. And that is the only way you can tell the story of your club, where you have come from, what you intend to do with this investment, and how it will increase participation and performance. This is key. This is a very high scoring question in the whole application process. There's a maximum of 12 points, which has got a weighting of 3, so 36 points just for this one question. And this is your only real opportunity to sell your club, sell your sport, who your members are, if you have any sort of new types of members, if you are being trying something new, if there's new communities involved, if there are those with additional needs, are now going to, you're adapting your service that you can include them in your sport. This is where you need to sell it. Okay, so if you're going for a capital project, what does it cover? If in doubt, ask, will it increase participation in sport? Then that's a good place to start. Do you have adequate title to your for the project? So do you have to get it signed off that you have title, or do you have to get your landlord to sign off Appendix 4? Do you share with other clubs or schools? If so, license agreements. And bear in mind what Dennis just said, where we have only 4 weeks left. How much? Get your detailed estimates. So this is what is it going to pay for and what's it all going to cost. Do you need plan permission? Yes, then you need to get that all, if it's there or it's in place. If no, you need to get Appendix 2 signed. How are you going to fund it? So if it's going for a loan, you need to get Appendix 1 from the likes of Clan Credo or the credit union or a bank. If not, have you got enough funds to match it in your club account? Why do we deserve the funding? That's where I'm coming back to your 800 characters. Sell the story of your club. Where have you come from? What is your ambition? What do you intend to do? Really sell, be ambitious, and let them see how you deserve this. This is your pitch. Draft your application. I would always suggest, if you can, try and get somebody on the outside of your club to read over it, because sometimes it can be very easy to say, but that's sensible. You know, I'm sure, of course, they'd understand that. But if you're outside of your sport and outside of your club, you may not understand it. And then proof it and submit it. Have a checklist and sign it all off at the end. I'll show you sort of an example of one. We go for equipment. What equipment have you decided on? It's the same. To be honest with you, to apply for 5,000 is probably the same as to apply for 50,000. You have to go through the exact same hoops and the exact same steps. So get your quotations for all the equipment that you're going to purchase. Is the bank account in your club name? Have you got your own funding? Are you going to share it? If so, do you need to get a license? What is the benefit? So how are you going to sell this to the club? Your 800 characters, draft, proof, and submit it. It looks more simple, but realistically it isn't. And then it's about getting organised. So I think we'll take some questions, because I can see it flashing there.
Yeah, we've kind of built it up there. I suppose I was just kind of reading them all. I'd take a note of all these if you don't cover any of these.
You work away.
I've them saved away in an email anyway, so if we don't cover anything here, I think there's a few questions on the wording for the application. So is it 800 words for the non-profit or 800 words from a school?
It's 800 words for everybody.
Yeah.
800 characters.
Characters.
Which is a lot fewer than 800 words.
It's like Twitter.
Another question on the Sports Capital Grant says you need 5% funding. Is this incorrect? Do we need 50% funding?
Yes, it depends. It's on that sliding scale, like I showed you. So it depends on what area you're in. And this has been quoted to me so many times, but it always said that you needed 5% funding. You could. It depends on your score. So if I can just scoot back to it.
Yeah, it's it's a minimum of 5%.
So if you see it there,
yeah.
So if you've got a score. So if you've got a Pubble index of below minus 21 and you only want to get a score of 1, that's 5%, okay? But if you want to get the highest score, which would be, 13, you would be going for 15%, okay? However, if you live in a Pubble index where you're above 10, you're completely the opposite way. The minimum that you can put in is 14%, sorry, and the highest that to get the highest score would be 38%. So this, and I it's constantly being said to us, but you only need 5%, you only need 5%. No, that depends on what your score is.
Let's go back onto the LED one there again. Generally, how long does it take for planning for LED lighting to go through?
Oh, well, that's up to an architect, but a planning permission could take you 6 to 9 months if you haven't already applied, especially for lighting. If it's new lighting in an area, lighting permissions are always very slow to get.
If you've applied before with others, how long do the license agreements last for?
There should be a date on your license agreement. with an
at-
expiry date.
But at the time of applying, if you want a license agreement to be valid, it needs to have at least another 15 years to run. So if your license agreement now is only 8 years, you need a new one.
There's a ladies club who don't have their own facilities and pay local clubs to use theirs in a pay when play agreement. So no official contracts in place. Would this go against their application?
No, but could you not get any sort of contract or some sort of agreement with them? But it won't go against you at all, no. You'll just explain that that's the facilities you use. But obviously you'd only be applying for equipment then.
And there's one or two questions on the Pubble Index, which you said you'll go through at the end.
Yeah, I'll go through it here.
Yeah, cool. I can continue again, yeah.
I managed to chuck myself out of a Zoom call one day doing this, so bear with me. Okay. Okay. Does anybody want to give me an address or an area in Cork? Don't be shy.
Or a postcode particularly.
Yeah.
We've you all straight in there.
James, you want to give me one?
Yeah.
P61, PF54.
Sorry.
P61,
P61,
PF54.
PF54.
Yeah.
54. Okay. So what we do is you've put in your postcode, and then we'll go over here to Pubble deprivation. Go down to 2016 by small area. Okay. And you'll see lots of different colors, and then we will just click on it. And in that moment, it doesn't work. There we go. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong here? What? We'll go again. Haha. So is P61 PF
54.
It's not recognizing it for some reason. Not too sure why it's not.
Would the color of the square, when you highlight it, show us your area code? As in, it had a blue circle around it, which
Yeah, I
would
know.
suggest very affluent. Would that not be your qualification then?
No, because you get a number.
All right, okay.
It actually should come up your phone number.
Try
That's why
zooming in then.
And that's why it's not. Not really sure why it's not. This hasn't happened to me on this one before. Does anybody else want to give me another one? I'll try just do P61 and we'll go from there, just saying Cork. So if we pick out different. Why is it when you go live? Just bear with me 1 second. Any ideas there, Dennis?
So the electoral division doesn't work, does it?
Not sure what's going on.
We're
So
down.
hold on. There you go. So this is what should come up, and you will see your deprivation index here. So it's 11.32. So we'll just try that one again. P61, PF
54.
54. Okay. There you go. So the index is minus 1.29. You're in the electric district of Gortro.
Yep.
Yeah. So your index would be minus 1.29.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Getting me worried there. Is there anybody else?
I do exist.
I can breathe.
Yeah, we have another one here. It's a Glanmire, so T45
T45
XE36.
XE36. So that index is 8.89.
We go again. T12.
Yeah.
FT82.
FT82. And that's minus 17.12. So don't forget, when I showed you that table earlier on, that will then decide upon how much match funding you need to put into the program for your points. So there'll be a minimum or a maximum. Some of them will be a minimum of 14%, and some of them will be a minimum of 5%.
One or two more, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
V92.
V92.
KX38.
KX38. So I've got 11.32. Is that would have been, that's obviously a city address, because I've got quite a few different options for it.
I'll just get a West Cork one here. P47.
P47. You see, that's what I'm saying. There was a couple of those there. So that's 0.12. So you might need to be careful when you're putting that in to check you've got in the right region for those ones that are in the city. Okay. So sorry, what was that?
P47.
P47.
CK70.
CK70. Minus 3.22. So it's just marginally below average. Okay.
I just had one or two other questions that's coming through there. Just going back.
It's just giving, and you can see there a very live example that it can go wrong. So just reload the page.
Perfect. This question here. If no title, then a lease is required, or will a license suffice?
A leasehold interest is title. So if the leasehold interest is for 15 years or more, then that is title. So freehold and leasehold are both forms of title. Obviously, freehold is forever, and if the leasehold is sufficient length.
And what are the fundamental differences with a school partnership application?
Well, schools are complex. The first thing is who owns the land on which the school sits, for instance. Sometimes you think it's the school, but it's often either diocesan land owned by the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Cork and Ross in this case, or it could be a religious order who may have transferred the land to one of their trusts. So it could be the Edmund Rice School Trust. That's the most common forms of ownership of the land, in which case the main applicant is the trust or the diocese with the school and the club. So they're complex things to put together. So for there, if some, now in some cases, there may be pre-existing license arrangements which have been agreed at a diocesan or an order or a trust level, which that school can piggyback on. But they are very hard to put together in 4 weeks.
Sorry, I'm just going through some of the questions I missed as well. If you are halfway through an existing project, can you claim for any costs already incurred? Project has not received any sports capital funding to date.
Well, the simple answer is you can't. The state operates on the basis that you cannot claim for money you've already spent unless they had approved you beforehand to do it. So existing projects, it's new projects, and you have to wait till they give you the provisional offer of the grant, and then confirm the offer, and then that they have agreed with the purchase strategy you're taking. So you have to be patient in dealing with the state once they offer you money.
And if your club doesn't have any property, what address should be entered on PUBL?
Whatever address you have as a bank address. So once your bank is your bank statement and your tax registration, whatever address that is.
Perfect, yeah, good to go.
One of the final things that we would just sort of draw upon when you're putting these applications together, don't forget to talk to your wider community, get some support for what you're doing. It's great to see Cork Sports Partnership is putting this together, but you should talk to your local TDs, talk to your local politicians, and let them know what you're doing as a club. There is a real drive for small clubs, and you've seen that before in terms of the funding that's being received across the country. This does not have to be a large scale project, and it doesn't have to be, it's always the big ones will get it, the big clubs will get it. They're very, very keen to see small clubs start to do small applications, and it is a learning process. Also be ambitious. Be ambitious in what you're applying for. If you're not going to get everything, then have a shopping list as such. Think what would we like, not what we will make do with. Put your application together, follow the different steps, follow the checklist. I'll just go back to that.
There's a question there from Patrick Byrne about a course owned by a CLG. So Patrick, if you're online, a CLG is a company limited by guarantee. So it itself is a not-for-profit. So you shouldn't need to have a separate license. So I'm not entirely sure why you'd also need a license as well. If the course itself is owned by a company limited by guarantee, which presumably is some holding company, but it is a not-for-profit in that instance.
James, it's okay if people want to ask questions.
Yeah.
To follow it up.
Sorry?
It's okay if somebody wants to follow, clarifications, and we ask question here, because Denison are just not too sure. So whoever asked that wants to actually speak.
So there was Dean Savage, the Department of Education is the landowner. Then you're looking at template 5A. So the department gives permission as part of the application that's being made then by the school with the club.
Okay, can I just, sorry, I'm Louise, my son's name came up on the Zoom. So Louise Phelan here, thanks for all the brilliant answers. So just to clarify there, I just was going back to your earlier where you mentioned it might be the diocese that own the land. Yeah. But if the Department of Education owns the land and template 5A is signed off on, the actual application, is it the school and the club are making the application, or is it, I just want to get that.
The main applicant is the school.
School, okay.
But then it has to have a license agreement executed with your club. Which is your club?
So the club will be the All GAA. the LGFA, the Camogie Club, combined with the school, we'll have the 3 clubs involved.
Now, have you already asked the department for permission?
Yes, we've sent away the template 5A for sign off, and the school will be the main applicant, but I just didn't want to get something fundamental like who's applying for this wrong.
No, yeah, in that instance, it is the school, because the department owns the land and they provide 5A. And so they would register an Oscar, but you would also register an Oscar. And then they would complete the submission, but referring to you and connecting to your Oscar. But the money that then gets allocated gets counted against the school and not against the club. So it doesn't stop the club applying for other stuff in its own right in future years.
So, but this year, the school is the main applicant. The club doesn't have to do anything other than sign the license agreement. Am I right?
You know, you also have to register an Oscar.
Okay.
If you haven't
Your
done.
partner.
And when the school is making its application and attaching the license agreement, it will have to connect to you, so they'll know that you're a real club.
Okay. But the club's application, does it have all the same details then as the school?
No,
No, it's just you're registered.
You just have to exist on Oscar. That's all.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But if you didn't exist in Oscar, when the school is trying to complete its application, it couldn't do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Dennis, Niall Kenny. Just curious if you have a non-for-profit in partnership with, say, the City Council, and you're applying for use of the waterways, which is under the Department of Housing, how do you apply for, who's the head body then?
So what are you applying for?
I'm applying for a Lido in the river, so I'm not technically on land.
And who owns the foreshore?
Department of Housing.
So
Who owns the riverbed?
you're in it.
But I'm not touching the riverbed, so I don't know if the Port of Cork would have that. I would assume, but does the City Council apply for it, or do we do a partnership with City Council and then apply through us as a non-for-profit? There's a tricky one for you now.
I think that's one maybe we'd have to look into.
So send me an email separately. We have been involved with foreshore licenses before and other things. So there, I don't want to give you a kind of a quick answer and it be wrong.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that.
Send me a separate email and we'll come back to you on that.
Thanks, Dennis.
Dennis, Patrick Byrne here. Sorry, I was sideways when you asked the question. So are you saying where our course is owned by a CLG, that the CLG applies for the grant and we register as a members club?
Yeah. So what's the name of the course?
Count Shabale.
Sorry?
Count Shabale, Dingle Links.
Okay. So the CLG, that's a company limited by guarantee. So is that a holding company for the club?
Yeah.
So it should be able to apply because that's a club. That's just a holding company. And you don't need to have special licenses or anything like that around it.
Okay.
So the department will deem that to be the club, and it is a not-for-profit.
Okay.
Again, if you have any further questions, just email me separately on them, Patrick.
That's great. I may have to clarify the history of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
James, can you let me share documents again?
Should be okay there?
Got it.
Yep. Questionnaires on when will the government announce the successful applicants?
For capital, it could be up to 9 months, 9 to 10 months. For equipment, it would be a lot quicker. It would usually be 3 to 4 months.
And someone did ask a question, does the sports capital grant cover training gear, bibs and jerseys? Well, yes, if they're not for personal use, it's a team jersey.
So it's always for non-personal equipment.
Dennis, could I ask a question there? Sorry, Monica Walsh is my name again, up under my son's name. Just where you have on Appendix 5, where you have a situation where your lease registration is pending. So where you're asked for the folio number in question number 3 in Appendix 5, and you haven't yet got the folio number from the Property Registration Authority. What would you advise there?
But you have a dealing number. So there's a thing called a dealing number. So your solicitor should be able to give you evidence that you have at least applied, even though you haven't got it.
Yeah, I think it might be a rectification situation, so it might not even yet have a dealing number.
Okay.
I would be pushing to try and get at least that.
Yeah. What's the name of your club?
St. Michael's.
So in some cases, it might be worth contacting the department, explaining your circumstances, right? They do have there's an email you can send in, a technical, if you like, legal, but your solicitor needs to do it.
Okay.
Right. So if you email me separately on that, they don't want to be deluged on those stuff, but there is at least you can, it is there. And sometimes, unfortunately, your title needs to be sorted before you can do something, because I'd have to understand why there is a difficulty. What the department doesn't want to do is give money and then find that the money can't be spent because it can't. It looks for titles so it can have a lien, if you like, it can have a recovery in the event that something goes wrong.
Understood. Yeah.
And that's why they asked for this. So if you email me separately, and I can at least give you some guidance on that. But it can be tricky because if the legal issue is not sorted, you may have a difficulty because it's not sorted.
Thanks very much, Dennis. Thank you.
Right.
Just on a few questions here. Yeah, I'm going to put up our email addresses now in a second. You can apply for both capital and equipment. Yep. And initially the quotations, you only need one, and you're not tied to that company to actually purchase or carry out the work if you are successful in your grant. Okay. So if we there's our email addresses there and our numbers and that there as well. If anybody needs any more questions asked as a follow-up for this. Is there anybody we've missed?
There's another one here. Just checking. From Mary, our Pubble index is high at 6.64. This means that for max scoring, we need to provide 34% of their own funding. Does this mean we can apply for grants towards equipment worth 88k, i.e. to get max 30k in grant?
Yes. So what would you want to work out? Do you want to work out if the maximum you can apply for is 50, add on the 30 on top of that. And if you are not successful in all of that, then it's pro rata what you will apply for. So if you get 30%, 30,000, you will add on 30% of that. So you'll add on 10k.
We open it to the floor if anyone else wants to pop in and ask a question.
Des McKee here, Cove Golf Club. Can I ask Patricia a question?
Yes.
In 2017, we got a grant for upgrading work on 3 fairways. That was drainage and sanding. Could we reapply for that in 2021? It's the same type of work, but on different holes.
That's what I was going to say. It's a different part of the course.
Yes.
Yes, then you can reapply. What I would suggest you do is show an outline map of your golf course and show where the work was carried out before and why it's different this time. So if you have an aerial photograph of your map of the course, obviously if you have a map as well, it would be even better. But if you have something aerial, just show the difference.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia.
I would also suggest if you could get one that's recent to show why it needs upgraded.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed.
It's a wee bit of in disrepair.
Hello, Dennis O'Brien from IGA. I have a couple of questions. One is in relation to sharing. We operate the one club system whereby the GAA, ladies football and camogie are all under the one governing body. Is that a qualifying sharing agreement?
Not if you are all constituted as a legal group in one. No. If you were three separate clubs with three separate constitutions and governing, you could have shared your facilities with a license agreement. But if you are all under GAA rather than, you know, GFC or, you know, something like that, no.
Right. And then in relation to, we'll say, community support, we as the club sponsors coach to go into the primary schools in the area, all the primary schools, and they use the facilities. Now, it's not sharing, but is there a facility in the application where we can show letters of support from the schools in support of our application?
Certainly, it always helps to have letters of
Yes.
support. So put that in, but I would also say, make sure you put that into your 800 characters to explain why this club needs investment, that you are doing this outreach work. So that sort of information is key for putting into the why we need this.
And where would we put those letters of support? If we got a letter from each school, was there value in that?
Well, you would, as part of the Oscar, you can upload documents, so you will be uploading those documents there. It's not something that will probably, you can't get points for it on sharing facilities. So if you had one or two, yes, it's good to tell the story of your club, but it's not going to get any additional points. All it is going to do is show proof of what you're saying in your club activities.
Okay.
But when you go on the Oscar dashboard, there's plenty of facility there to upload.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, good evening. How's it going? Quick one. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track. We're a school, and we are looking to apply for funding just basically for like an outdoor equipment area and equipment for the school. So is it to say that we can apply ourselves? We get the license agreements from local clubs, but do they then have to register on the Oscar trainer per se?
Yeah. So Mark, what's the school?
It's John the Baptist in Limerick.
Okay. Who owns the land?
That's one question I need to go, but I think it's from the diocese. It's from
Yes,
the
okay. So your applicant, main applicant is the diocese, complex stuff, right? To put together.
Yeah.
But yes, the clubs that you're granting access to under license would themselves need to be on Oscar, so that they can, so that the sport department can see that they're real, if you like.
Okay, cool.
Which is kind of a three-way agreement between the diocese, the school, and club, or it could be, and another club. So it could be a bit challenging to do in the next 4 weeks if it is not.
Yeah, no, we've kind of a lot of information from kind of applying previously, so I think, yeah,
okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Somebody asked from Stephen German, asked on hockey. So, yes, I mean, a center of excellence is a different thing, because then you would be, the university would be partnering with a club outside the university, which is a national governing body, or right? So that's a different thing. But you'd want to have, obviously, there would need to be their appropriate license in place at the time of applying. But yeah, centers of excellence where clubs outside of a university, and an NGB is deemed like a club in a way. It can apply, and then you're into the regional fund where the amount of money is higher, but you have to have particularly the license agreement in place.
There's another question there. Is sanding a pitch a capital expenditure?
I'm assuming it's for irrigation purposes.
Yeah.
Not for a walkway, though. For some reason, there is a exclusion about walkways.
and a few messages from privately there. For those who are not ready, when will the next grant be repeated? Is it 2022?
It's kind of a political decision. We really would like if they would stick to the same time frame, but you know, they do come out each year. I would imagine they'll do the same. It'll be open just before Christmas 2021 to apply early 2022. What I would say to you is that, you know, the work starts in your 2022 application on the 2nd of March 2021, especially if it's a capital project, because often there's a lot of stuff to get organized.
Sorry, just going through the questions there again in case I missed any. Quotations, you need initially 1 or 3?
1. And they can be like a screen grab. So if it's a piece of equipment that you're able to buy online, you can take a screen grab of that. And you're not tied to that supplier at a later date either.
Okay, I'm just going through the start again. I think I may have missed 1 or 2 at the very start, but if anyone wants to jump on and ask a question, jump in now.
Do you anticipate a further extension possibly in light of the COVID situation to the 1st of March?
They've already extended.
Mm.
So I can't see there being another one. Although I think I did actually state that week that I didn't see any extensions coming. So don't quote me.
Sorry, Patricia, Niall, quick question. If you're suggesting being ambitious, so if I was looking for 2 million as a capital investment, is that too ambitious?
Just a wee bit for this one. I would go for the large sports grants, which is also available at a later date.
But actually, that raises another question. Would this grant then possibly fund a feasibility study, or is that considered?
No, this would be specifically for sport.
But for a sports facility, though, to guarantee.
No, this is specifically for equipment for sports, so it wouldn't be for things. But I would also see, would there not be funding available through Leader or through your sports partnerships or something like that? Yeah.
We would try and tie everything together.
Yeah.
I presume you're not excluded from any further funding if you get this as part of even just for equipment.
No.
Niall, what's your club?
We're actually just a committee trying to get a Lido in Cork. So we're just a non-profit committee. It's called Cork Lido Committee, I suppose, is the closest I have to it at the moment.
Right.
We're looking at 12 months on the road rather than this year, if that's okay.
And what would be your NGB?
Swim Ireland.
Okay. So one thing to consider is would it be considered potentially a Swim Ireland large scale Swim Ireland project from a regional centre of excellence or a large scale sports infrastructure fund?
We could apply for both and get equipment through the sports capital.
Yeah. So then, the LSSIF, you know, can go up. I'm not saying there's no limit, but I mean, there's been 20 million allocated on the last round to Connacht Rugby redevelopment. So big projects need to think of, particularly, but they'd have to be part of the NGB's own plan, if you like.
Yeah.
And then, so just to think in those terms.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis.
Could I just ask a question? Oh, sorry. Could I just ask a question? I'm Karen Amani from the Rainbow Club in Cork. This will be our first time applying for this. We run I suppose the centre really looks after children with autism and additional needs. So we're looking at now, I suppose, really a programme we put together over 5 years and built, and now expanding that and partnering in the community with the community centre. So we're renting rooms in the centre, but the centre and us have now been able to secure a piece of land next door from the city council. So the community centre will have the licence, and then we'll have a lease from them. So are we understanding it that they need to be registered with Oscar? We're already registered with Oscar, and then we do the application. Is that right?
If you have a lease from them, is the lease executed, Karen?
Yes, and we'll have support letters from the city council and partnering clubs that we will be working with as well.
How long is your lease for?
Well, the lease with them will be, I think the land itself is for 12 months on the one that's there, but there's another piece of land that they have a 100-year lease on that they're going to give us a longer lease, a license of 100 years, but they're looking at giving us a long-term lease on that section of land then, if the other one doesn't work out.
Okay, well, that sounds like that again, at the time of applying, you need to be able to demonstrate a clear title in some form.
Yeah.
Right, and that has to be of a sufficient length.
Yes, so there's two sites, one that has a longer title and one that has a shorter title. And we were hoping the one that just came in would be a longer title, but we're thinking now to go with the one at the side of the building, which is owned by them for 100 years. So they have a long-term license on that, and then for us to get a long-term lease on that then from them. But will they then, they still have to register and we apply?
No, again, just trying to be clear, Karen. So if you have a lease interest from a landlord, no matter who the landlord is, it could be me, right? If you have a leasehold interest of more than 15 years, you're deemed to have title.
Okay, perfect.
And then you apply.
Okay, perfect.
So leasehold is a form of title, but you need, if you're 15 years or more at the time of applying, then you have title, but you'd be the applicant.
Great. And once we can still just have the planning application in and it being processed, that'll give us some scoring anyway, won't it? Once it's gone in.
Have you ever got money before? It's your first time. Well,
yes,
good score having never applied before and so on. So that wouldn't be the biggest thing. Right? Good title, but just be mindful that the title documents are executed by your solicitor in time.
Yes, perfect. That's great. Thank you very much for that, Dennis. Thank you.
A question there about mountain biking. If you are seeking grant for actually developing the tracks, then yes, you are going to have agreement with Kilcha. Whereas if you are just buying the bikes or equipment for usage, safety equipment or whatever, no, you won't, because you're only applying for equipment. So it depends what you're applying for.
So Roy Watson from the Glen Resource Centre, we're a community sports centre that was built specifically 20 years ago to cater for people in disadvantaged area. And up until recently, we would have been classified in the rapid area. But when they changed to the Public Deprivation Index, we're unfortunate that the specific spot we're in is not classified as disadvantaged, but every single area in a 360-degree area, we're surrounded by areas of disadvantage. But yet, because we're not located specifically in an area disadvantaged, we get very low score. We're scored 0 in 2017 for our last funding application. Is there any way of arguing our case?
Have you checked it by postcode?
Yes.
And Mark,
so we're in the Public Index index, it comes up as marginally above average area, but all the areas surrounding us are areas of disadvantage. But when the last funding we got and they provided the scoring results, and we got a 0 out of a possible 3 for that.
Do you mind if we check it?
Yeah, no problem. I can give you the code there.
1 second. Because then it's easier for us to comment if we can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the postcode?
So it's T23 DH 95.
95. Okay.
And the school building right beside us, St. Mark's School, is considered a DISH school as well.
So
So all the areas to the left there are areas of disadvantage.
So where are you actually in this map?
You can see, can you see Errigal Heights? If you go down and over to the right, you might see St. Mark's BNS. So just down from your mouse, go straight down, and to up a small bit. Yeah, keep going up.
Errigal Heights, St.
Yeah,
Mark's
so
BNS.
Yeah, so just above the S in St. Mark's, you see the building there, and it's the Glen Resource Centre. So just above St. Mark's.
Well, you're
Just
coming
there
up
to
at minus, coming up at 0.01. The entire area. Well, that's gone.
and a lot of that area is just public park as well. So there isn't actually a whole lot of housing in the area that we're
See what you
highlighted
mean.
in.
So you're going along this line showing you at 0.01.
Yeah.
And
Whereas
then this one here is going 24.
Yeah.
Minus
So
24.
Yeah, so they're literally the other side of the wall, and that's what the purpose of the centre being built is, to provide facilities and services for those people in areas of recognised disadvantage, but yet we get an unfair scoring because of where the facility is actually located physically, as opposed to the people that we're servicing.
Very strange. It's so close, you know.
Yeah.
Like in terms of your it literally is the other side of the wall.
Literally, yeah. I did speak to the department in 2017, well, the Sports Capital Office, and they were just sticking to their guns in relation to the physical location.
And did you appeal it, or what sort of feedback did you get when you did appeal it?
I didn't appeal it, but I said I would try and do something about it before the next application, and I've made contact with 1 or 2 local TDs, and I'm just awaiting to hear back as well from them.
Okay, so if you think that's your score, is there anywhere else you can try and get more points, like in terms of sharing your facilities, having license agreements in places? And
yeah, that was the other area. I mean, it's a community sports centre, so it's not a club. So it's open 7 days a week, you know, to a good number of clubs, schools, youth groups, so on and so forth. So it's
multi-use.
It's multi-use. So it's the whole reason for, you know, it's the epitome of sharing a facility.
Yeah.
But again, we get 0 marks because we don't fit their criteria of having a license agreement sharing with another club or another school. The facility is owned by Cork City Council and managed for them by the Glen Resource Centre CLG.
And is there any problem in terms of Cork City Council signing the agreement to letting you apply either Appendix 4 or Appendix 5 of your lease agreements?
No, there's no issue there.
There's no issue there.
There's no issue there.
Is there any chance that any of the users of your club right now could enter into a license agreement with you?
No, we can't enter into any legal license agreements because we have a management agreement with Cork City Council to manage the facility on their behalf. So it would mean we wouldn't be able to enter into any shared license agreements with clubs.
It's legally precluding you from doing that?
Yes.
Okay. This might be an idea, maybe just give us a wee email afterwards, and we can talk about it, because I don't want to go into too much detail just with a huge audience here. Drop us an email and we can have a chat with you about it and see where we can maybe help.
Great, thank you.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I know this is going out as a presentation afterwards, but we can shoot up the email addresses again.
Yeah, great, thanks.
There's one or two more there. What's the minimum you can apply for in terms of equipment?
Nothing really.
There is the minimum.
But if you want to put that amount of paperwork together, I would suggest you make it worth your while.
Okay. Is it possible to find out scoring from previous application in the 2018 round?
Yes, you can get the whole review, which will give you everything for your county, sports in your county, how people have, what clubs were successful, what clubs weren't. That's all in the 2018 review.
And if your own application, if someone applied on your behalf, whoever had made the application, who was the contact number, should have received the score.
So use whatever negatives, if you did have any negatives in your last application, and turn them into positives this time around. Address those points.
Going back to again with the clubs with no property. What if they're living outside the area where the club is with no property? Would this not give misleading score in Pubble?
There's so many ways I could answer this question. I'm trying to figure it out. Yes. Now, if you have no site in the area that you are actually, if you're sport, if it's, as anybody tell me what type of sport it is, does it play on a specific field in a specific area, or is it like going across a whole county? Is it marathons? Is, you know, if you are based in a certain area, then that's where your project is. And if your Pubble index is high, that's the address you put down. If you are a roving club that don't have any sort of base whatsoever, you know, you have to give something, and that has to be an address. So that's the score you're going to get for whatever address you're in.
Sorry, Patricia, I'm asking that question. Michael
Okay.
Considine here, Blarney Cycling Club. I'm the treasurer for the club, but my own address is outside of Blarney. However, the club is based in Blarney. We don't have a clubhouse. We don't have any property.
But would there be any more
And the bank
members from
statement-
there?
Pardon?
Would there be any members from there?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Would they be okay about using their address for a postal address?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's
Well, then
other
that's-
committee members that are based in Blarney, so I could, if that's allowable.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just ask them, because you're really just looking at postal address for that area.
Okay, thanks a million.
Okay.
Does the 800 characters include spaces and punctuation?
No.
Punctuation.
Punctuation, yes, but not spaces.
And I think there's one from Dean. If the GAL, GFA and Camogie are all under one banner, is that considered one club or three?
It's 3 clubs if you've got 3 separate club identities, and they're constituted as separate clubs. If they all are just subcommittees of the one club, then they're all the ones. They're all the same. They are one club.
Can I ask you just, Tricia, on that one, just to be clear,
Yep.
do all 3 of them then have to be registered in Oscar in terms of the school application?
Yes.
Okay.
As I say, you just have to be registered as an organization.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's okay.
Is it 3 then in terms of scoring that the partnership is with, or 1?
Sorry, the applicant will receive the score, who are the applicant, but you will be partners. So they just you have to be registered. The other clubs have to be registered as licensees as such. So they just have to be registered to show that they exist. But it's whoever is making, the school is making the application. It's the school who will be getting the score.
Hello, it's Trina Hannon here. I'm in the school near Kinsale. I'd like to know if the diocese owns our land and the Department of Education funded our school, then do I need 2 titles agreements from the solicitor in that case?
No.
For this?
What's your school, Triona?
It's Dundera National School outside of Kinsale.
Okay, so it's diocesan, is it?
It's diocesan owns the land, and Department of Education would have funded the school.
Oh, then it's the land. So the main applicant is the diocese, right?
Okay.
Then operates a license agreement with the school, and then, unless it's in a trust, and then with whatever club. The department has nothing to do with it.
So I need to get back to the Diocese of Cork and Ross to get a proof of this, do I?
Okay, well, what club are you planning to go in with, Fiona?
Ladies football Kinsale.
Okay, so have you drafted a license agreement between you and them?
Not yet.
And that license agreement actually has to include the diocese. Are you aware,
Okay.
as the Diocese of Cork and Ross executed any license agreements for any of its schools to date?
I don't know.
It could be quite a
With
tall
us?
ask before we, Triona.
Oh, so is that like in relation to our school or just in general?
In general,
In
to other
general,
schools.
so I suppose, again, that's my point. I suppose school is who owns the land first, and then there needs to be legal agreements drafted, because it does involve a license agreement, are quite slow where it involves church authorities. Now, I've been involved with them, with the Loretto Order, with Erst, with the Methodist Church, and so on. But it's much quicker if your particular diocese, such as Cork and Ross, has done one in one of its schools.
Okay.
So, but if they haven't, and therefore you are the pioneer, getting it done in 4 weeks, I would say, is nigh on impossible.
Okay.
But it's still important to go about it, maybe for next year. And I've been, so again, you can email me separately on that, and I've been through a lot of these, and they're unfortunately never quite straightforward. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for that.
I see somebody there had asked for any templates for a license agreement. There is in the application pack, and I've showed you just in the PowerPoint here. I've just showed you what should be included in that there, so that will go out to you tomorrow as well.
Yeah, they are guidelines, but in the end, the license agreement is a legally binding agreement between the parties. So you are going to end up with both the landowner having a solicitor involved, as well as the licensee. So the licensor and the licensee, and sometimes the landowner, the licensor, and the licensee. So they do take a bit of time, unless a previous template has been agreed, let's say particularly with the landowner on one of his other assets. But the guidelines will go out in terms of what they should contain.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
All right.
Dennis O'Brien, back to you again. Sorry, no. Our lease, there's 12 years left in it. We're in negotiations with the OPW to get that extended to 40 years. And we're hoping to have it in place before the application. But if it's not true, can we submit some kind of a letter from our solicitor to say that we're going through the process?
Have you got money before?
We got money in 2008.
Then that doesn't.
Did that involve the OPW at the time?
Well, the lease was fine at that time because there was still 20-something years on it. But now there's 12 years left, and we're trying to get it extended.
Well, what I'm saying is
Actually, I think it was the Department of Defence at the time, but it's switched to the OPW since.
There's a technical issue, Dennis, in that the OPW is very reluctant to grant liens on its assets. So you could have a technical problem, and you're not the only one with it. So again, you might email me separately.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay. The score -3 on the deprivation percentage thing. You just need to look at the table. Which will be going out to you all there, and you'll see that table. It's also in the sports capital guidelines. Yeah. James, have you?
I think I've pretty much covered the questions in the chat.
Yeah,
I hope I haven't. If I
Is
missed
there
anything.
somebody else waiting to speak? Or?
Hi, Patricia, Nevin Butler here. I'm not applying for anything this year. I'm just setting myself up for next year. And just one curious question that I'd put in and just want to be 100% clear on. When I'm applying for my tax number in order to access Oscar next year, do I need to follow up on anything after that? Or is it just, as you said, just an identifier, just a PPN number? I don't have to do a tax return or anything else after that?
No, because you're not involved in any taxable activities. It's a non-profit voluntary organisation.
Okay, so once I just fill that up, email it in, walk away.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know people get worried about this here, but let's be honest, Big Brother knows you're there. There's no point in trying to hide.
Yeah, no, it's just
I know it fills everybody. It's one of the most common questions we always get.
Yeah.
What do we have to do once we register?
Grand. So just fill it up, make sure my club name matches my bank account name.
And make sure that you have yourself down as a voluntary non-profit making organisation.
Yeah,
That's
and pick somebody's air code who will get me a good number.
I couldn't possibly comment on that one.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, I think we're good, guys, unless anyone wants to jump in right now. No, okay. Guys, thanks very much. Very informative. I hope we answered everyone's questions. I suppose if anyone has any other thing going forward, just pop me an email, like an address to the guys, and I'll send on the slides and the recording. I have a couple of other resources as well. We actually have Neil Fitzgerald from Cork City Council here as well joining on, so she'll just give a small presentation of the Sports Capital grants coming up from City Council. So Niamh, I've sent your co-host there, but while we're setting up there, Dennis and Patricia, thanks so much for this. Delighted to see such interest. I know it's 130 different people signed up. A lot could make it tonight, so they'll get the recording as well, and we had a number of people on waiting list, so it was great to see the interest. And guys, just want to say thanks a million again, and very well presented, and questions, everything, thanks a million. But yeah, and hopefully we'll come across each other again soon. But yeah, thanks a million, guys.
All right.
Guys. Thanks again now. And Niamh, if you want to jump on.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, James. I'll just share my screen there if I can. No, I can't. 2 seconds now, sorry. Sorry, I'm not used to just share screen here. This one should share okay. Yeah, so hopefully you can see I've just got a small little PowerPoint presentation which hopefully just covers the main points of the Sports Capital Grant Scheme for 2021 that Cork City Council is offering this year. So basically, normally this time of year, clubs and voluntary sporting organisations within the city area would be aware that Cork City Council advertises the Sports Capital Grant Scheme for that year. Unfortunately, I suppose due to the pandemic at the moment and the fact that clubs are on lockdown, contractors, builders, suppliers are all in lockdown, we've made the decision to actually just defer the Sports Capital Grant Scheme until around April of this year. So for those of you who might be actually watching out in the press or keeping an eye on our website or social media channels to see if the sports grant has been launched yet, just let you know it'll more than likely be early April of this year before it's actually open to applications. But in the meantime, I'd advise people to just, start getting their ideas down on paper, and even I can make last year's application form available. It won't be too different, really, to be honest with you. You can have a look at that and just get an idea of what you can actually apply for. So basically, the purpose of the grant there is to assist local voluntary sporting organisations and clubs in developing and enhancing sports and physical recreation activities throughout the city. So basically, we're providing grant aid to projects that are directly related to enhancing the facilities and are of a capital nature. The capital nature is an important one there. We don't provide funding for kind of discretionary items. So just to bear that in mind, I'll go through it in a little more detail as I move along. The scheme is not intended as an alternative to any other sports capital grant scheme. I suppose especially the Oscar one that was just discussed already this evening. what we will do, however, is complement any of those kind of schemes. So what I'm talking about here is we have had clubs in the past who may get a national grant to do something along the lines of pitch resurfacing or a new pitch or some kind of major capital structural works like that to their facilities, but mightn't have the funds to maybe put in security fencing around the new pitch or a new area. So what we can do is we can help with, let's say, the cost of the fencing, which, you know, could be 10 or 15,000 for a club of a decent enough size. So we will complement any funding that's offered on a national scale, but without providing funding for the exact same project, I suppose. There are other works then that may not be covered by more national grant schemes. So we look at each case individually. The applications we will process and bring to our sports committee, where they'll be discussed. And I mean, I know there's a lot of local councillors in the city involved in various clubs and sporting organisations across the city, and they'll certainly do their bit for the clubs that they're loyal to. The 2021 Sports Capital Grant Scheme, we're very lucky actually this year. We've managed to retain a sum of 400,000 in our budget. So as I said earlier, it will launch in April 2021 and the budget for this year is 400,000. It used to be 270,000, but when the city boundary extended there back in 2019, we got an increased budget for 2020 and we've maintained that for 2021. So the conditions of the grant scheme is that the applicant must be a local sporting organisation or club, and that they must be located within the city boundary, or at the very least provide evidence that the majority of those either who are members or are using the facility live within the administrative area. So there are a couple of clubs that might be literally just on the outside of the border, actually in the county area, but they would get the majority of their players or membership from the city area as such. So we look at all those, and to be honest, we've looked very favourably on those in the past, those kind of clubs that are just on the boundary. So there's two types of grants. Basically, you can apply for minor grants and major grants. The minor grants are for requests of funding of less than 5,000. So again, it's the likes of enhancement of minor enhancements for premises, pitches, the purchase of non-personal sports equipment that will have a lifespan of at least 5 years. And just to say that the likes of helmets, clothing, boxing gloves, slitters, hurleys, footballs are not eligible. They're all deemed to be personal equipment. So we've had numerous applications in the past and applicants that have been disappointed because they didn't qualify, but it's because the majority of their application, I should say, was actually for what was deemed to be personal equipment. So look, if you're looking for exercise equipment, things like, you know, weights that can be used in a weight room, or I suppose the major grant element would cover kind of, you know, bulkier gym items and major capital works. But there are certainly things that we can support, but just to be aware, personal equipment doesn't qualify. Just a few photos, a few bits and pieces that we were delighted to be able to support in the last 12 months. So major grants are for requests of funding between 5,000 and 10,000 euro. Again, for the enhancement of premises and pitches and for the purchase of non-personal sporting equipment. So basically what we ask is for the club to demonstrate that the works or the equipment that is being purchased will meet a sporting need, and that it is of a capital nature, and by that we mean that it will have a lifespan of at least 5 years. So just to show you a couple of items there, there was a rowing machine, dugouts, ride-on lawnmowers, toilets, outdoor toilets for visitors to the club for matches and things like that. We do require a little bit of supporting documentation as well. So we do ask for estimates and quotations to be provided for all works or expenditure that will be incurred through the application. We also ask for an outline of the costings and timelines. So let's say, for example, the overall project cost is going to be 20,000, you're applying for 10,000, where's the other 10,000 going to come from? So, you know, just give us a bit of information on that, and show that you have the ability to actually raise those funds if you don't have the funds yourselves. If there are funds available within the club, provide evidence of that. We also ask for a copy of the previous 2 years for the club as well. Copy of the previous 2 years accounts, yeah. So if you have any queries, you can direct them to my team inside in City Hall. You can get us on sports@corkcity.ie, or you can ring either myself at 492-4646 or my colleague Barry at 2389853. Or we have a sports development officer, Laura Cody. Laura can be reached at the sports@corkcity.ie email address as well. And if you have any queries in relation to sports within the city, Laura would be more than happy to help where she can. All right, so that's it from me. But if there are any questions or queries about the scheme, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks a million, Niamh.
Thanks, James.
If anyone has any questions, want to pop in, but yeah, thanks for coming and jumping on, Niamh. And I suppose I will follow up in the morning, guys, with the recording of this session that's included. And Niamh, if I could get the slides as well from you as well, so that clubs can, I suppose, direct it to the rest of their committees and club members, because I know some people couldn't make it on, so people are here on behalf as well. So as I said, we had over 128 people registered tonight, so I'll send it all to everyone. So even if you want to share to your own committees or people that you might see of interest, I can send all those documents in the morning. But if anyone doesn't have any questions, or if anyone doesn't know.
Hi guys, sorry, could I just ask one question there?
All right.
Hi Dave, can you hear me? Say Michael's. Just wondering, do we have to show a percentage of funding available to get the grant or apply for the grant, or is that necessary? What's the crack?
No, Dave, but what we would ask is if you have a means of even part funding it, to show us, like what we do ask is for a copy of the previous 2 years accounts, so we can kind of see the club's, I suppose, financial status to a certain extent through those. But to be perfectly honest, and I should probably have included it in the slide, what we do look at is the size of the club as well, and the impact that it has on the area and on the local community. Like, there are some very big clubs that have a lot of finance available to them, but by the same token do need assistance because of the great work that they do in the community. There are also some very small, I suppose, niche clubs, we'll call them, that equally might only have a very small reach, but that reach is very important within their selected community. So I suppose we just have to see that there's, I suppose, it's a financial soundness really is what we want to be assured of, because unfortunately, if you don't, I suppose we carry out inspections usually in the couple of months after the grant is awarded to make sure that it was used correctly and for the purpose intended. Unfortunately, if it's deemed to have not been used for the correct reasons, we can actually request the grant to be refunded to ourselves. So I suppose it's in everybody's interest that we just are assured of financial soundness.
That's perfect. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Anyone else? We all good? Okay, perfect. So again, thanks a million, Niamh, for jumping on. And as I said, guys, I'll send all the information in an email in the morning, and I'll actually include a survey kind of form as well for a bit of feedback as well in terms of us providing courses and workshops going forward. We have a busy year ahead. With our online courses, our child protection courses, first aid, webinars such as this volunteer workshop. So keep an eye on our Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And if anyone has any questions, give me a shout, and thanks very much. And yeah, all the best, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks, James. All the best.
See you, Niamh. Bye.